Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a deeply thought-provoking piece that, honestly, challenges the very foundation of how we look at global development and charity. Okay, let's dive into this. We're looking at a fascinating framework regarding the massive conflict between the politics of short-term aid and the pursuit of true long-term empowerment. You know, it's a tension we see constantly on the global stage. Do we just provide immediate relief, or do we actually invest the time and heavy resources required to foster genuine self-sufficiency?
To really understand the environment we're operating in, take a look at this graphic from the source material. It pairs the phrase aid scrambles, primarily for scores, period, right next to a Sudoku puzzle grid. And it is just a brilliant visual metaphor. It illustrates how the game of aid is so often treated as a totally cynical political scramble. It's literally like a giant puzzle where players are just trying to fill in the boxes to get points or scores. These represent short-term, cyclical fixes rather than actual solutions. The numbers just get moved around the board, but the underlying puzzle, it remains completely unsolved.
Section 1. Meet Olayomi Oladavid, the visionary.
To truly grasp this perspective, we need to understand the visionary author behind it. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is her unique personal branding. You can see the bold overlapping O and D framing her name. This strong mark reflects her overarching mission for global transformation. She isn't just writing poetry in a void. She is establishing a distinct voice and a clear platform aimed at changing how we think about the politics of aid. She approaches these massive, complex global issues with a profound sense of personal responsibility.
Let's break down the specific attributes she shares in her profile. She proudly states she is a Nigerian and that she absolutely loves people. She is intensely focused on global development and transformation. But here's the thing, she isn't just a critic. She genuinely enjoys generating solutions, providing clarity, and actively influencing policy and strategy. Furthermore, she explicitly states that her worldview is guided by her faith, noting that her Father God owns and rules the universe, acting as the wheel within her wheels. So this combination of her Nigerian background, her focus on tangible, long-term policy, and her deep faith uniquely shapes her poetic, yet incredibly practical approach to development.
Section 2. Handouts versus True Empowerment. Sustenance. In a piece titled Musings, Politics of Aid and Handouts, she utilizes a really rhythmic, repetitive, poetic structure to basically deconstruct how we view basic human needs. The pattern begins with a super familiar concept but frames it perfectly. On the left, give me some fish, and I will return for more. Right? This is the classic short-term handout. It satisfies a hunger today, but guarantees dependency tomorrow. On the right, she contrasts this with, get me a net and some lessons, and I will return with thanks. Notice that shift from give to get? It implies a process. By providing the tools, a net, and the education, some lessons, the entire cycle of dependency is broken. The result isn't a return for more handouts, but a return with true gratitude.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Give me a meal and I will return for more. Again, the immediate consumption creates a recurring need. But look at the right side. Get me a stove and some game, and I will return with thanks. She is really layering the complexity here. It's no longer just about catching the food. It's about having the infrastructure, like a stove, and the raw materials, some game, to prepare it yourself. It's about fundamentally building the capacity for self-sustenance.
She drives this point home even further regarding physical sustenance. Give me some fruits and I will return for more. Fruits are the final, consumable product, right? But the alternative is, get me a field and some seeds and I will return with thanks. She's pointing out a massive shift here from merely consuming to actively cultivating. This reoccurring theme in her work constantly reminds us that handouts breed reliance, while tools, land, and seeds breed self-sufficiency and genuine appreciation.
Section 3. Intellect, Community, and Enterprise.
Now, her musings are so comprehensive because she doesn't just stop at physical survival. True transformation requires development of the mind, the community, and the economy. Look at how she views education. Give me some words and I will return for more. Spoken words, advice, or momentary instructions are fleeting. They require you to keep coming back to the source for more guidance. However, get me a book and some notes and I will return with thanks. A book and notes are tangible study materials. They empower the individual to learn independently, to reference, to study, and to actually grow their own intellect without needing the constant presence of a benefactor.
This philosophy totally extends to the social fabric as well. Give me some friends, and I will return for more. Casual friendships can be transient. They might just address a temporary need for connection. But she highlights a profound difference with, give me a family and some time, and I will return with thanks. She is illustrating the difference between a superficial network and the deep, permanent, time-invested bonds of a family. True community requires investment and enduring commitment, not just a quick social fix.
When it comes to personal capability, she has a very specific take. Give me a hand, and I will return for more. We often talk about giving someone a hand, but she points out that this just leads to them needing another hand later on. The empowering alternative is, get me a skill and some knots, and I will return with thanks. Learning a tangible skill, understanding the intricacies, the literal knots of how something works, is infinitely more valuable than just being pulled up by someone else. It's a real game changer.
And this brilliantly illustrates one of her most powerful thoughts in the entire piece. Give me a sign and I will return for more. Get me a problem and some tools and I will return with thanks. This is all about dignity. Waiting around for a magical sign or a perfect moment is just paralyzing. But being trusted with a real problem and being equipped with the tools to solve it, that validates a person's capability. It says, I believe you can fix this. That trust and empowerment are what generate true, lasting gratitude.
Finally, she applies this whole concept to enterprise and economics. Give me some money and I will return for more. Financial handouts are the ultimate quick fix. Once the money is spent, the need immediately returns. But look at her solution. Get me a trade and some rules and I will return with thanks. She believes isolated financial handouts pale in comparison to learning a formalized trade and operating within structured rules or markets. It's about establishing a sustainable economic engine for the individual.
Section 4. The true cost of transformation.
Look, the shift from global dependency to individual responsibility isn't easy, and Oluyomi Oladevi doesn't pretend it is. This brings us to a concept she tags in her work, the burden of responsibility. You see, taking a handout is easy. In one of her stanzas, she writes, "Give me a ride, and I will return for more." Getting a free ride takes zero effort, but the alternative she provides is, get me a vehicle and some rounds. To operate a vehicle, to do the rounds, requires actual work, maintenance, and responsibility. The shift from relying on effortless relief to embracing long-term empowerment means accepting the burden of doing the heavy lifting yourself. So, the crucial point is understanding this trade-off. This is another key theme she tags. In global development policy, the trade-off is the conscious exchange of immediate, easy handouts for the challenging, time-consuming, but ultimately sustainable acquisition of skills, fields, and tools. It means policymakers and charities have to be willing to do the harder thing, teaching the lessons, providing the stoves, transferring the trades, rather than just scrambling for short-term scores on a political board.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to reflect on, drawn straight from her insights. In our own lives, when you try to help, whether it's on a global policy scale or just in your own neighborhood, are you providing a handout that creates dependency, or are you providing a tool that builds a future? Oluyomi Oladevi's powerful words challenge us to put down the fish and start teaching the lessons. Thanks so much for joining us on this explainer, and we hope this helps you rethink your own approach to empowerment.